Did you know that the integration of artificial intelligence in healthcare is not only inevitable, but could completely revolutionize patient care and medical research? My guest today believes this transformation is right on the horizon.
Obviously, I thought very deeply about that. This is an important question, Christian, and it's very difficult to imagine the privilege. I mean, we are at an era where everything is going to. It will be a world, I hope, of abundance. I think once everything can be provided by these agents and humans don't need to read.
Luis Pareras is a distinguished investor and thought leader leading Invivo Ventures, a pioneering venture capital firm focusing on groundbreaking innovations in biotech and healthcare. They are at the forefront of investing in transformative technologies that could redefine the future of medicine. In this episode, we will dive into 5 critical insights that could reshape your understanding of the future of healthcare and investment strategies. The first one is the future of artificial intelligence in medicine. Explore how artificial intelligence is poised to revolutionize healthcare. The second one are ethical dilemmas in biotech. Understand the complex ethical considerations that come with rapid advancements in the field of biotech. The third insight is the role of venture capital. Learn how strategic investments can accelerate innovation in the healthcare sector. The fourth one is balancing innovation and regulation. Discover the challenges and opportunities of navigating regulatory landscapes in biotech. And the fifth one, advice for entrepreneurs. Gain actionable insights for biotech startups looking to attract venture capital. If you're interested in the cutting-edge advancements in early-stage healthcare and biotech, this episode is a must-listen. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and share this podcast. Your support helps bring you more insightful content like this for free. Trust me, you will want to watch the entire episode to grasp the full spectrum of Luis Pareras' vision for the future of medicine and investment. I couldn't agree more. I always loved the time in Barcelona. And you set up a fund in Spain and have a quite remarkable history. On one hand, you have sound medical expertise and bring also 25 years of venture investing expertise to the table. I always like this intersection of two pillars of expertise. How does the expertise in medicine shape your investment decisions these days?
Wow, what a beautiful way to start an interview, taking me back to my roots, Christian. I think, of course, there are things that I inherited from medicine and from neurosurgery, right, into what I do for a living. And probably the first thing that comes to my mind is, of course, high ethical standards. Okay, I mean, from neurosurgery, I think I inherited putting the patient at the center of every decision that I make, right? And caring about patients very humbly in a genuine way, you know. So when young analysts at our fund or associates get their first observer seat at a board, you know, I always call them aside and give always the same advice to them, you know, a crucial piece of advice, which is if at a board you're debating or making a decision, always imagine a patient sitting next to you. Okay, because if you think the patient would feel bad about the decision you're about to make, don't vote in favor. Because it might look like good in the short term, but in the medium and long term, I can assure you, ultimately, it's not going to work. Okay, so value in our industry is very aligned from the patient. I think that comes from probably all investors have patients in mind, but in my case, I treat patients myself all the time, and that is always present, right? Second thing, maybe, I think there's a story Let me share a real story, okay? One that has an important learning point at the end. When I was doing my residency training in neurosurgery, there was this one senior neurosurgeon from whom I learned almost everything I know about the field. Okay, I won't name names, obviously, but here's how it went. We would go to operate, the two of us together, okay? And he would methodically put the MRIs on the light box, and he would start explaining in full detail why we should perform allobectomy, going on and on obsessively on the reasons why. And by the end of his explanation, I was already convinced, of course, that allobectomy was the right course of action. But then, Christian, every time, almost like a ritual, he would look at me at the end of the explanation and say, or maybe not, and then he would go on to explain why we should not do a lobectomy and instead remove the tumor from the inside or whatever. I don't care. The point here is the ability to sustain two opposing ideas in your mind and debate with yourself is a very important quality, right? And that, I think, that was because patients, intel comes in chunks. First you see the patient, then you get the lab results, then you get the MRI, then sophisticated tests, but there's always very incomplete information. And surgeons, at the end of the day, we commit at the last minute, and we decide at the last minute what to do because we are receiving things and things and things. And this is something that I think it's interesting. Because again, going back to this ability to debate with yourself, I think intelligence can be measured by the amount of uncertainty an individual can withstand while still being able to make decisions, right? Both intelligence and freedom, I think, right? Good scientists are free in their pursuit of truth because they can sustain several opposing ideas in their heads simultaneously, right? So, yeah, that's something that comes as well from my MD era. And finally, maybe the last point, it's difficult. I mean, it's a bit abstract, but I think it could be useful. I like a type of personality that I call the rock personality or the lighthouse personality. I don't care. Mm-hmm. In neurosurgery, when an aneurysm breaks, you're operating the patient and you have 3 minutes because otherwise the patient dies many times at the table. Okay, you need to stop the hemorrhage, right? And there's no point in entering panic mode. And you see, when I see a lighthouse, I mean, the lighthouse doesn't care if there are very big waves and stormy weather or it's very sunny, it just is there pointing the way, right? So this calm in making decisions, I mean, decision-making under pressure and with incomplete information and being calm. And if something really bad happens, you just go on doing what you were doing calmly. And if something very good happens as well, you go on without paying much attention. Okay, that was very good, but there's a lot of work to do still. You need to keep on operating the patient. Many things could happen in the future of that operation. So in this sense, this rock personality or this way of looking into things where successes do not matter much and failures do not matter much either. You just need to keep on going. I think that's something that I got from medicine as well. But yeah, I would say that this is what comes to my mind now.
Yeah, solid skills, definitely. I mean, two stand out. I mean, the last one that you said, emotional, keeping your emotions in check. I think this is very, very important, especially in the field of investment. You had an excellent matrix in your book where you explain the failures in investment. And I read it today in the morning, and there are these two quadrants of failure. And I always thought, yeah, well, if you're emotional, I mean, on one hand, in the upper right corner, you can tap into FOMO, fear of missing out, and just riding the trend at the top of the trend. And on the lower end, you can start doubling down on the wrong team. You fell in love with the technology, fell in love with the team, and then you pour money into that. And I think on the public markets, there are a lot of absorbable stories there.
Oh, for sure. And you can never get in love with an investment, by the way, because you never know what will happen,
Yeah.
You need to get in love with the problem that the investment or the company you're investing in wants to solve ultimately, right? Solving that problem, but not the company nor the C-level executives at the company, because sometimes, they are always, sometimes you need one type of CEO and sometimes you need to change the CEO at some point, So yeah, but that's very true, Christian.
I couldn't agree more. Could you share one of your earliest memories that hinted towards science and innovation? When did you know you want to go on this life journey?
Oh, wow. I remember something, maybe it's a bit, it's funny. I think when I was 4 or 5 years old, what I wanted to do for a living was to be ready, a newsstand vendor. These guys that sell newspapers at the newsstand place. And that was because I loved to read when I was really young. And I thought, wow, this guy has all the comics here, and all the magazines and everything. And I wanted to be like, a newsstand vendor. And then after that, I wanted, of course, as many kids, I wanted to be an astronaut. Lots of kids want to. But I learned the stars and I started reading about science, about the stars, and naming stars, thinking of the sky as my backyard, and I used to go with friends when I was just a little kid. It was very weird, probably a bit nerdy. I don't know, maybe it was 7, 8 years old, and start naming the stars in the sky and pointing the north and etc. So, yeah, I think reading and the love of science came very early in my life. Of course, life is complex, sometimes you set a goal and you pursue that. Some other times life takes you from place to place. But these are my 2 probably earliest memories of me loving science and loving this field. Yeah.
That it's going to the moon, going to the stars. Maybe you also start in future then like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, your space company. Is that something in your plans?
No, that's definitely not in my plans, but I love what they do. I love what they do. That's very true. Yeah, I think they're very bold. And being bold is important in life. Yeah.
While you were speaking, I tried to look up, here it is, from your book. I'm half through with the book. Let me just share the screen. When I find it here. You start your book with a quote from a famous US writer, Jack Kerouac. I hope I spelled his name right. And the quote talks about the outstanding people, the mad ones, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at the same time, the ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing and burn for something like candles. And I think it was Steve Jobs in 1997 who used a similar theme for setting up Apple in a new direction when he came back to Apple. What I would be interested to hear, what are the mad ones in science, in your opinion, that change the world? What does it mean to you?
It is amazing that you go to the first quote of the book, because this, you are very right. This quote is very important for me. It's a very important one. I wasn't aware that Steve Jobs used that. But just let me clarify something. In this quote, when they say burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles are fireworks, okay? So it's looking at people that are fireworks, you see? Mm-hmm. And at the end, because I know this quote by heart, right? And he says something like exploding like spiders across the stars. And in the middle, you see the blue center light pop and everybody goes, how? Wow. It's considering people that, or loving people that are like fireworks. Okay. So the mad ones for me are special people, and by mad ones, of course, I referring, of course, to the scientists, right? But people that are very interesting, very different, that people that are able to live in the world for years, but never becoming the world because they are free thinkers, They don't get easily influenced by the world. They can go against everybody if needed. They are contrarians, and like scientists, they are in a spiritual quest for freedom and truth. Yeah. And especially the scientists that are contrarians, because if Christian, how much I love matrices, because you are reading the book, you told me. But if you can imagine like a matrix, a 2x2 matrix, okay? And on the one axis, there's the followers and the contrarians, right? And then the other axis is you are right or you are wrong, okay? Of course, being right is the most important thing. But after being right, if you are in the quadrant where you are a contrarian, then you suddenly invested in something that's really scarce right now. And its value, it's so much higher, So being against the tide in the investment world, I think it pays off, honestly. So I love to be a contrarian. And but in any case, what this quote really means, or I'm using this quote to signal that I'm surrounded by this type of people all the time. And this is the biggest privilege of what I do for a living, Christian. I mean, being with people, finding new ways to solve problems, people that are incredibly intelligent, incredibly brilliant, creative. God, I really love what I do, and that's the reason why I love so much what I do, is precisely because I'm surrounded by these kind of people. And this quote, I'm amazed that you picked the quote instead of picking like the text of the book, right? Because again, it is an important quote. It is not just because I chose one little quote there and I put it there. No, it is very central in the way I think, looking for this type of people always.
I was pleasantly surprised when I read your book that you quoted right at the first chapter. One of the authors, I love. Yeah. And I always ask myself, why Silicon Valley is such an outstanding ecosystem in 2024? And one of the explanations, in my opinion, delivers Jack Kerouac in the book. He describes the spirit in the 50s or 40s and 60s in the United States in this area, in this book. And I think these are the roots of the culture that's still in Silicon Valley prevalent these days. And Steve Jobs read this book. So I found it on a reading list that someone who will be on my podcast in June posted on her Medium profile. And we will talk about Silicon Valley. And I think Steve Jobs used it in the Think Different campaign in 1998. A similar quote where he points out that it's the unusual people, the mad ones, like you described, that change the world at the end of the day. And it needs a lot of emotional strength, because it means when you are a contrarian, that you always do things and look at things that the majority of people don't like yet and are not convinced that it's a good thing. How do you deal with that?
Yes, I mean, people that are not convinced are very important. Let me share with you again one anecdote or one way of doing things, right? When I want to invest in a company, or we are analyzing a company with the team and we're discussing about the company, and then if I'm really excited about the company, I typically socialize it a little bit in the sense that I explain it to other investors, other fellow colleagues, or key opinion leaders of the field, QLs, or the same team, right? I mean, we discuss among the team. And, my field is the leading edge, of course, and the very early stage. That's where I thrive and what I do well. But in that field, when I explain this to the team and to the key opinion leaders and to other colleagues, etc., other scientists, if everybody agrees that this is a good investment, I don't invest. Okay? Why? Because it's too late already. It is not leading edge anymore. I mean, I need people to really don't see the investment. I need to be a contrarian in a way, right? So yes, it is important to do things, because competition in our field is so fearless and everything happens so fast here. If you do something that's very obvious, probably many other people are doing exactly the same in other companies, right? So you don't have like this gem that you thought you were having. So things need to surprise me. I must feel even a little bit uncomfortable with the investment myself. Otherwise, I'm not in the presence of really something leading edge, right? But yeah, that would be my answer.
Yeah, surprise. Your book was a pleasant surprise, starting with art, starting with quoting writers. I think it's unusual for a finance book. Usually, I think the picture of finance people is still this old white man sitting in a chair counting his money and totally being into numbers and not art. What role does art play in your life?
I would say art is really important for me in my life, and it shows in the book. You're right, because every chapter starts with a quote from a writer. Typically, most of them are from the beat generation: Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, and Prima, precisely the ones that you were mentioning before. I don't know why, but I love that generation. But art for me, it's important because it acts as an equalizer. Okay, it's in a way it's an escape from all the problems of the day. I want my mind to forget everything. And when people, because I love to paint, for example, this is something that people don't know, right? But I love to paint. I have like 300 paintings I have at my house. 300. Wow. They are all over the place. It's messy, right? But I love art in general. And people tells me, of course, but you must feel very happy with art, right? And it's exactly it's not happiness what I'm after. It's mental detachment, because while I'm painting, probably most of the time I'm suffering because it's not happiness what drives me. I never paint when I'm happy because there's no point. I paint when I'm struggling with something and I want something to get out of me, right? And I use it like as a channel to get it out. But maybe art, as now that we are rambling a little bit about the thing, and I love to ramble. Let me warn you. But I think art, a painting, for example, or a book, wants to tell a story and to communicate emotions and ideas effectively, right? And that is very important in venture capital as well. Venture capital uses storytelling to pitch ideas, to convey the vision of portfolio companies to other funds, or to communicate with all stakeholders in a compelling way. So I think art plays a role as well as a beacon precisely in communication. And of course, as well, in art, one must be somehow, bold or audacious or fearless. I don't know. But this boldness, I think it's also useful in life. So I take a lot of things from art, and it is very important in my life. So you noticed, passion, creativity, all these things are important.
300 pictures, 300 paintings is impressive. You mentioned, maybe can I dig a little bit deeper in art, in painting as an outlet? There's one question I would like to ask you. And you mentioned that you don't paint when you're happy. You paint when you seek an outlet, when you want to express something, when something is working in you, and when you struggle with something. Would you put it in words what painting does as an outlet to express an inner struggle, what it changes?
I think both painting and writing, Christian, are cheaper than a psychotherapist. And so in a way, what it does, it gets me back on my feet. Maybe, being a managing partner at a venture capital fund, you get like a distillation of the worst problems that all the companies are having, because there's no point in looking at the things that are working well, right? So my desk is always full of things that are not working, and only those type of things, not the beautiful ones, right? And art to me is just like the opposite. When I visit a museum, for example, and look at the paintings of someone that I love. Now that you're asking, Basquiat, for example, would be my favorite painter, or the abstract expressionism of New York in the 50s, exactly at the same time was the Beat Generation. Something was happening in the world back then that made everyone so incredibly interesting. I don't know what was that, but all that comes from that moment in time. I think it's amazing, right? So yeah, defining words, it's like a cheap psychotherapist for me. Yeah, plainly.
Which style do you practice? Do you have a picture or a painting that you could show?
Well, actually, if I move the screen a little bit, you can see this is one of my paintings.
Ah, cool.
So it's a very big format. It goes down. So it's there are very big paintings, like 2 meters by 1.5 meters, something like that, and almost all of them, and they are very aggressive. And I always write things on the canvas. So yeah, that's my way of looking into art. But there's no good or bad in art, this comparison, but is this better or what? That doesn't make sense in art. Art is just you are expressing yourself. I don't care if it's good or bad. It's just what I love to paint. But yeah, I mostly paint nudes. Probably I'm very interested in the human body and the figure, and yeah. And in an expressionist way, writing things that sometimes are very controversial or aggressive, or you don't want one of my paintings in your living room. I can assure you that. Yeah, that's the real choice.
I think art should create emotions at the end of the day. So if it's the role of art in our life, so that it changes something in people, that it touches a string, touches them.
And that makes you see something that you did not see before. Yeah, because in art, you connect the dots, exactly as in the famous pitch from Steve Jobs, right? About connecting the dots. But in art, sometimes you're thinking about a problem and then you see a work of art and somehow it brings up something that you haven't thought, and then you connect the dots and you use it to solve some problem that you're struggling with. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit romantic about art, but it shows that I really love art, right? So, yeah.
Is there a particular lesson from art that helps you understand the venture capital world better?
How? Let me think. Yes, I would say so. Let me tell you an anecdote about art that I love. What it shows is that people is what matters. Okay, and when you have a venture capital fund, 80% of the problems you will encounter in your activity are related to human behavior, right? And related to people. And there's one anecdote that I love. In fact, there are a couple of anecdotes I love, but the first one that comes to my mind, for example, Jean-Michel Basquiat was dating Madonna, back at the time. And they were dating, and at some point, Madonna started seeing another guy, and Basquiat painted, like, I think there were 5 paintings of Madonna, and he gave them to her. So Madonna was holding 5 paintings of herself, painted by Jean-Michel Basquiat. Imagine the privilege. These paintings today would be worth 500 million, something like that. Yeah. And so Madonna started seeing another guy, and the story tells us that Basquiat summoned her to his house, asking her to bring back the 5 paintings. And in front of her, he painted them all in black. So he destroyed the paintings, this rage. And this tells me about human condition. What humans do and how difficult are human relationships. And when I find people that I struggle to really connect with, because they are the founders, they are super experts in what they do, but they are difficult because we're surrounded by difficult people, right? I always remember that anecdote because I think it can get worse than that, so you need to work to solve things. And if I may explain another one, I think that one is even better. When Pollock, the famous abstract expressionist painter, was painting his first drip paintings. I'm not sure if you've seen one of his paintings at the MoMA or at any other museum. He painted without touching he never touched the canvas. He threw like the painting over the canvas, right? And he was married at the time with Lee Krasner, another abstract expressionist, I think even better than him, but she was a woman. And back at the time, it was super unfair. But history has remembered more Pollock, right? And he called Lee to his studio to show her the first street painting he ever produced, right? He was like, what have I done? And what mesmerized me about the story is the question that he asked Lee, okay? Because one of us would have asked, do you like it? Is this a good painting, right? But instead he asked something like, is this a painting? I mean, the guy was so unsure of he was so on the leading edge that he was not sure about what he had done, right? And he was asking, is this a painting? And every time I'm in front of true leading edge, when an entrepreneur comes, a scientist comes and pitches me about something he came up with, if it's truly disruptive, I feel exactly the same. I don't understand. My question is this doable? Because I really don't believe it at first, right? And that is something, that I think brings from art something useful for venture capital. I can see, Christian, if you don't mind me saying, that you love the frontiers. And I do love the frontiers as well, because the frontiers between disciplines are where the opportunities are. And I'm amazed most of the questions in these first minutes of the conversation are trying to find commonalities between medicine and venture capital, between art and venture capital. So interesting. I don't know. I think you can draw conclusions from those frontiers, and they are interesting. Thank you for the questions.
Yeah, you're welcome. I completely agree. I think this intersection of different disciplines is where innovation thrives and is born at the end of the day, and where our great inventions are coming from. Steve Jobs, we talked about a little bit of him. Zen Buddhism. He brought Zen Buddhism into Apple, into a tech field. I think the success speaks for itself to intersect and to connect people, although we need focus. You mentioned also quite often in your opening words, problems, that you get a lot of problems on your table. And in your book, if I remember it right, you described that you see deep tech as investing in problems, not solutions. Yeah. And I thought this is outstanding, because usually it's solutions. Could you elaborate a little bit why you emphasize the problem?
Yeah, there's two types of companies or investments an investor can make, right? Some people find a problem and come up with a solution, and that's one type of companies. People that have found a solution to a problem, right? And some other people have a very beautiful solution looking for a problem. It is not the same, and the problem is essential. To me, the secret of having a return, if you want to make money by investing, you need to invest in something that solves a big problem. But if you want to make really an immense amount of money, what should you do? Well, invest in something that solves a very, very, very big problem, right? So to me, problems are essential, right? And the problem in our field, in biotech, is precisely the clinical need. You're trying to solve something that is happening to a patient, right? And then you think is, can we be disease modifying here by making this investment? Does this science, this potential new drug, bring a solution to this problem? Meaning, can we change the natural history of the disease? And then the disease needs to be somehow unsolved. because if it were solved, the investment wouldn't make sense. You see what I mean? So, yeah, a side note, maybe I'm rambling a little bit. I love to ramble, huh? But the side note of this is that in our field, in leading edge, in biotech and deep tech, right, there are literally no rules, no mentors. You cannot go to someone to ask if this is a beautiful solution, right? But your guiding point or your surrogate for that is the nature of the problem instead. I mean, is this worth solving? And there's another principle I love. I try always to be guided by beauty. Okay, when a scientist comes up with a beautiful solution to a problem that makes sense from a biological perspective, I mean, has a strong biological rationale, and it looks beautiful. At least sometimes it looks beautiful to me. Beautiful is the right word. Typically, I think it is. I mean, beautiful correlates with truth here. I mean, it is true, And so this principle of looking into the problem, it's not that the solution is not important. The solution needs to be beautiful, needs to be elegant, needs to make sense. But the problem still, it's the most important part. I mean, I could tell you, if you tell me what you want to solve, I could tell you right away, half of my investment decision could come from what you're looking forward to solve. It's as easy as that. So, yeah.
It's an interesting point. I spent a few years working myself into coaching philosophies, and the idea is to jump very quickly to the solutions and not so much into the problem, and bring people out of their problem thinking, because they delve most of the time into that. And it was a refreshing perspective to also read your book and see that problems have their space and solutions have their space. One question to what you said beauty of science. In science is beautiful, but in the early stages, I always thought that the early stages are rather messy. I would not have used the word beautiful. In your opinion, what's the beauty in the early stage where everything is root, crude, not cut out? Sometimes information is missing. You see some dots, but you can't really connect it yet. Where is the beauty in this field for you?
Oh, there's precisely where the beauty lies, when not everything is solved, and you can contribute some value to the scientist that's coming to see you. Of course, scientists are super experts at what they do, finding solutions for patients, but you need to put that solution that you found in a very long process, until it gets first in human first, and then eventually gets authorized to be used in the market, right? So there are lots of pieces of the puzzle missing, right? Especially at the beginning. But precisely what excites me the most is solving the puzzle. I mean, working together with the entrepreneur, which has a great mind for science, but maybe he's not that trained in seeing how this science could translate into a drug and into something that captures value, and helping scientists in solving that. I think that's what I love the most. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great work. I couldn't agree more. I love it since 2006. In your book, it reminded me of Kathy Woods. Kathy Woods runs ARK funds, invests in public companies, now has, I think, also a crossover fund, and started a venture fund. And she always likes to publish once a year her Big Ideas report, where she talks about these big areas where we need solutions, where we have problems and need solutions. And in your book, I found a few chapters, and I would like to draw up one, which I also looked up while you were speaking. Where you show areas of science, areas in future. My question to you is, when we pick one of these areas, which one excites you the most these days? What do you think has the most impact on humanity in the coming years?
Yeah, these are like two questions into one, because if I think what will have the most impact probably in the coming years, and if we make that coming years like 5 to 10 years, of course, it's AI, right? I mean, artificial intelligence is coming. But what excites me as well is not only AI, but synthetic biology. Okay, I think if you want to make sense of what is going on in the 21st century, you need to understand both disciplines, both synthetic biology and artificial intelligence, and they both are going to change the world. Okay, and in synthetic biology is heavily used, for example, in the two fields that I love the most in biotech, which are cell therapy and gene therapy. Okay, in our fund, we only invest in cell therapy and gene therapy, and the platforms we invest in, typically most of them have some connection with AI. So AI is super important. It will become very important. I don't think any company, I'm going to say something probably a bit bold and and counterintuitive, but I don't think any company in 2-3 years in the synthetic biology field will make sense without an AI platform inside. You know what I mean? You need to make use of AI. It's like going from the paradigm of finding a needle in a haystack, which is the way we look for drugs right now, to designing like 1,000 needles, because some AI helps you design those 1,000 needles. I'm finding the one that really works the best on the problem that you're trying to solve, right? So yeah, I think cell and gene therapy, synthetic biology, and artificial intelligence would be my answer. Maybe it would be useful for the ones listening to the podcast to define, even if very briefly, what synthetic biology is, right? Because it's a word that's, it's biology that's synthetic, right? But synthetic biology is based on the fact that life is programmable, okay? In the same way you program a computer with zeros and ones, okay? We know the letters, the coding letters for programming life, which are adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. These are the 4 letters of the DNA, right? And we know so well how they work that we can modify them or add them to any genome of a cell to make the cell do whatever we want the cell to do. It is almost unbelievable, but we can transform a cell, for example. We can create a cell from scratch to, for example, eat the plastic in the oceans, right? That would pose a very serious regulatory problem, of course, because what happens if those cells go rogue or whatever, right? So I'm not claiming that you can code a cell to, for example, eat plastic, as an input. Or in medicine, which is the field that I know the most, is, for example, a CAR T cell. CAR T is probably a word that people are not familiar with, but they are changing the way we treat hematological malignancies in medicine. That means leukemias, lymphomas, these type of things, right? So basically how it works is we take the lymphocytes from the patient. This is the only thing that I'm going to mention that is highly technical, but don't focus on the technicality, just focus on the concept, right? We take the lymphocytes, the T cells, okay? We remove the T cells from the blood of a patient. We modify them genetically by adding 2 things to these T cells, which one of the things is like a target signaling what is the thing they need to bind to. And this target needs to be on the surface of cancer cells. So we're telling them, look, this is the cell you need to tackle, right? And the second thing is you put some co-stimulatory domains inside the cell that transform like the T cell into like a lion. I mean, one T cell can eat like 1,000 cancer cells, right? It's like a nuclear bomb. You confer acquired specificity, and on the other side, you confer like a violence in killing those cells. That's very interesting, right? And when using synthetic biology, just a few years ago, before the era of CAR Ts, a leukemia, for example, you could easily have a 90% death in 1 year. Okay, so the prognosis of the patients was dismal. And now with the last iterations of CAR T cells, by the way, just as a disclosure for conflict of interest, we have many companies in our portfolio with CAR T cells, right? But now you can see survivals of 97%, 98%. That means it changed completely how we treat patients with an hematological malignancy. And now we're starting to do exactly the same with solid tumors. They are a bit more difficult for reasons that maybe are not interesting for this podcast, but in a technical podcast, I would love to elaborate a bit more on this. But
we can do a second podcast later on for the technical parts.
Yeah, we could do that. It would be interesting indeed. Yeah. It has changed completely what we do as physicians, as MDs. No, so.
I totally agree. And it's thanks to people like you and scientists, so the investors and the scientists who are working on the solutions every day in the lab. I had an episode, a friend almost died last year from cancer. And without science and the advancements of the last decade, he would not be here now. So this is a great job by medicines and by investors and by the pharma industry to move that all forward. And scientists have a lot of ideas. So I remember a panel discussion I had, I think it was 2018, 19, and we talked about ideas. And then someone in the audience said, but what if people copy my idea? But why should I tell my idea to other people? And in your book, I read that you say ideas are worth nothing. Execution is everything. Do you have in your VC experience a story where the most brilliant idea in the world failed due to poor execution?
So many. Yeah, so many. But let me start with this bold thing that you mentioned that I wrote in the book, right? I teach at several business schools to MBAs and to this type of people, right? And these are very smart guys and women sitting at the class typically, right? And I start the class by asking, what is the value of an idea? How much? And then they come up with so beautiful ways of trying to find the value of an idea. And it's always an interesting discussion. But at the middle of the class, I typically stop them in the discussion and say, look, I'm going to share now what's my opinion on what is the value of an idea. And I tell them, look, the value of an idea is zero, nothing, rien, niente, res. I don't know more languages. I mean, zero, right? If you bring it into the marketplace, it might be billions. But the idea in itself, it's nothing. It needs to be executed. I think ideas, of course, I'm over-exaggerating a little bit here just to make my point, right? Because an idea, something that a scientist comes up with in a research lab, it is the foundation and the pivotal point just to move forward. But the idea is just the start. There are so many decisions that you need to make during the life of this idea moving forward, that, I mean, all the hard works that goes into making things happen, all the way first in human first, and then to market authorization, all the lots of small decisions taken by the CEO and the boards, that are decisions that are compounding in value because each decision compounds over the previous one. This is so important, and this is so neglected sometimes when we talk about ideas. And I'm a true believer. I mean, we investors, let me tell you, Christian, we don't invest in ideas. I don't invest in ideas. I invest in the execution of ideas, which is very different. Okay, so the people driving the company, it's very important. They are the key to everything, right? So the idea in itself, it's not the most important thing, right? But you asked for a specific example. if you don't mind, I won't name names because I need to be careful about the impact of what I say, because the stories of, I can talk abstractly about failures, but I wouldn't go there because anything I say, everybody will think about a company, a specific company, and I don't want to
maybe
because there's no blame.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Maybe just the lesson learned. So how can we avoid failure when we have a brilliant idea? What's one lesson that you say, look at this, this makes sense. When you have a brilliant idea, you need to do this.
Yeah, I mean, you need first to surround yourself with the right people to make the idea happen. Okay, because you're not gonna make an idea happen on your own. Okay, I mean, forget about that. It's a big team and a team that changes over time. At the conceptual phase, when the company is super early stage, maybe the scientist can be the CEO of the company, and maybe you need specific profiles, but then you start executing and you start realizing you need different profiles, and eventually even the CEO must change. We typically change the CEO when we get into clinical phases, not because the scientist is I don't know, it's wrong all the time. No, it's just because we need someone that has the expertise, that has done this before, and every stage of a company needs the right CEO and the right team, right? So my advice would be just not for the idea to fail. Surround yourself with the best minds, better than your mind, if possible. I mean, hire the best people in the world to make that happen.
Yeah, and especially to add the skills that you don't have. Bring it on the team.
Nobody have all the skills.
I think one interesting story from observable to what you said, to exemplify that, Elon Musk, for example, with SpaceX, who would have thought that a private company can shoot cargo into the orbit and have dreams 2 decades ago? It was just stupid idea. Private companies don't do that. And he found investors who invested in his ideas. And at this point in time, when the investors invest, they are these contrarians that you mentioned, and they would like to explore the term contrarian a little bit more with you. You do the same. So basically, when scientists approach you with brilliant ideas, they might look stupid at the first place because nobody's doing it at this point. How do you handle this situation?
That is so true. A good idea might look like stupid at the beginning. That's so true. Yeah, maybe one example here would be, let me tell you a real story, because sometimes the scientist comes with something like that, but sometimes the scientists, they even never come to see. It's us going. I mean, sometimes we invest from a paper that was published. I mean, there's even no intention to have a company around that science, right? But we approach the scientists. Let me share one. This is a success story, so I can share because I don't need to. For example, a few years ago, we were thinking, look, the next stage in gene therapy is going to be lung. Okay, that was our thought back then. There were 0 companies in the gene therapy in the lung space, right? And just by serendipity, because these things happen like this all the time, by chance, because I read a lot, as you can imagine, right? But I read a paper from Maria Blasco while I was having this idea that we should have an asset in gene therapy in lung. Then I read a paper from Maria Blasco. She's an amazing scientist and a KOL in telomeres, in aging, and these type of things, right? And I read a paper she was publishing that she could reverse pulmonary fibrosis by elongating the telomeres. That means rejuvenating the lung in a way, right? With a gene therapy. And I called her just out of the blue. I remember the anecdote, if you allow me to share a few funny stories. I wanted talked to her, and her secretary wouldn't let me through because she thought it was like a commercial call, because scientists are not used to VCs calling them out of the blue just because they read a paper, right? But I thought we can make a company out of this. And I talked to her, and she was immediately interested, and we engaged in discussions over the following weeks. And ultimately, we created one company that is receiving a lot of attention in the field right now, and it's moving forward to treat patients and eventually to solve the pulmonary fibrosis. Let me remind you again the importance of the clinical need, in this case, the problem, right? Pulmonary fibrosis is a disease that once you are diagnosed as having a pulmonary fibrosis, it's either pulmonary transplant or death in 3-4 years. And there's nothing that is able to solve that. Imagine the nature of the problem, right? Mm-hmm. So, this contrarian thinking, I mean, at the time, there were no funds investing in this. And today, I think last time we checked, there are like more than 20 companies in the space. So in that particular occasion, we were right. Sometimes we are wrong, Christian. I mean, but you need to have like a map of what's going to happen, what is going to be in the future of medicine, in order to focus to the companies or the problems that you want to solve. Because we don't choose companies, we choose problems to solve, right?
Yeah, so basically you invested in the first of its kind with your idea, and you went in really early.
So yeah.
You go in that early so that when you identify, if I understood it right, an interesting paper with an interesting technology and science behind it and scientists behind it, so you also start approaching scientists and pitch your idea of starting a company. It's a great approach.
Yeah, because we think we define first the areas, I mean, the modalities. Mm-hmm. I mean, for example, every quarter, I sit with with the most senior team, right, all the partners, etc., and we debate and we decide on what are the hot fields that we want to be in, right? And in those meetings, we decide for the companies we would be looking for adding to our portfolio in the coming year, right? Of course, it's an iterative process because science moves very quickly and the hot spaces move very quickly. And by the way, I changed my mind completely. I mean, all the time. I mean, as Walt Whitman said, if you don't mind me going back to art, I contain multitudes. I mean, I reserve my rights to change my mind continuously about that. Sometimes I love a field, but then after a few papers I read and a year has passed, the field is not flying, I lose my interest for that field, and now I'm interested in some other field, you know. But you need to decide in advance. At least that's our style of investment. I'm not, of course, I don't want to be dogmatic. Every fund does. I mean, what we do for a living is difficult, so every fund does it with their own style, and I don't want to claim our style is the best, but yeah, we care about the field and the indication that we want to solve in advance before seeing the companies. So I already know what companies I'm going to be looking forward to investing in. And typically, there are companies, sometimes they approach us, yes, but most of the times we approach them because we look for the space. I mean, what is in the case of gene therapy in the lung, there was no other company in the space, right? But there are other fields where, for example, if I want to have an RNA therapy in a specific field, then I would look for the companies that are at very early stage in Europe, or scientists that are looking to create a company out of their ideas and evaluate them all, and then pick the best one, the one that I think will solve the problem the better, right? So that's our style, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is, my opinion, in venture investing and innovation investing, it's one of the most important terms, contrarian thinking. And what you described in the last minutes is exactly that. On one hand, of course, I mean, scientists want to change the world, investors want to change the world to the better. So this is basically the daily business. But what I saw on the market is that very often people forget that investment is also about making money. and you need to return capital to the limited partners at the end of the day. And you only can do that, in my opinion, and the companies only can do that when they apply contrarian thinking in their investment approach, because there is the huge opportunity. I mean, we had a grab.
Absolutely agree. I think applying contrarian thinking is important, and also genuinely caring about the patient. I mean, trying to add something that makes sense. Then you cannot be wrong.
Yeah.
If you because that's a very big if, huh? Because when you start, you have animal models. You know it works well in animals, for example, but you don't know how well it will translate into humans, right? But you know where you're going, at least, right? And that's the goal.
Yeah, having the end customer in mind, I think it's also, you said it at the beginning, it's one of the most important parts, to see where the journey is heading to, and how it translates into value for people at the end of the day. When we talk about building companies, there is, and especially leadership in companies, and how to set up or how to get people moving. In your book, you advocate for a culture of urgency. Could you explain a little what you mean, what the meaning of a culture of urgency is for startups?
Yes. Look, at my place, in my office, every friend that comes in and sees, I have a very special painting that I painted just for myself. This is not even a work of art. It's just a very big canvas with some words written in it, right? It's a message to myself, okay? And the painting, and when I sit at my desk, I see it just in front of me, and the painting says, "You are 6 months late."
Okay. Oh, really?
Imagine how important it is to me to create this idea of urgency that I created in myself first. I mean, you need to run really to solve things, because you need to understand, Christian, the speed of the progress of science in our field is so fast that an idea has a window of opportunity, but if you don't act very quickly into that window of opportunity, you may lose it completely, because then another idea will appear that somehow does something different and better than the previous one. So you need to jump to a wagon that is moving, So if your idea derails, it will be eaten up by competition. Again, speed is overwhelming. So yeah, it is important to try that the companies you create have this idea in mind. Of course, at the end of the day, good results are even more important than speed. You need to have good results, and sometimes science needs some time, but you cannot lose a minute. I mean, you need to be decisive in your decision. You need to have an execution focus. You need to prioritize things. Scientists typically, they want to know about everything, and they should. I'm not saying they shouldn't, right? But yeah, knowing about everything may add some value, but they need to focus as well into what matters, right? Because otherwise we could get lost in the desire of knowing about everything, but not executing what we need to do in order to make this drug a reality, right? So it is always this balance between scientists willing to allocate the budget into many things that are not necessary, and as investors at the board, in my case, myself, for example, when I sit at the board of a company, fighting them, saying, okay, you can do this and this, but not this and this, because we need to focus on what we're trying to accomplish here, right? So focus is important. And at the end of the day, speed equals focus. If you have focus, you have speed.
Yeah, I agree to what you said. There seems to be a field of tension, let's call it this way, between basic research and corporate development, developing
Absolutely.
a solution.
But don't you find this beautiful? I mean, I think it's a beautiful tension, indeed, a super interesting one. And I think both sides are right. How many discoveries have been made just out of serendipity because the scientist was obsessed? I mean, I cannot, in good faith, tell the scientists, don't look into that. I would never do that. But I need to prioritize, because we have a budget that is limited. We have, for example, I don't know, we just raised the Series A for a couple of companies, one $65 million. You have these 65 millions, okay? And with these 65 millions, you need to accomplish quite a few things. Yeah, you may now and then do things that are just because you feel there might be something of value there, but not all the budget. The budget clearly needs to be allocated to moving the drug forward and reaching first in human and then doing the phase 1, the phase 2, etc., right, of the studies. So, yeah.
I think this is, to what you said, I think this is the freedom of basic research to explore without limitations.
Yes.
And
yeah. It's the explore-exploit dilemma, probably, right? I mean, yeah, you need to explore, but at the same time, you need to exploit. And there's a fine line between, you can make a company fail if you don't choose the right balance between the two. Huh? So careful.
And this is what I would like to hear from you, your process and your secret in moving ideas forward into a company and turning a scientific idea into a patient solution at the end of the day. You also describe in your book the critical path method, which I think is very important to define milestones. How do you handle that throughout the process when you take an idea from a scientific research organization with a team? How do you, maybe we can explore a little bit the process, how you then move it into a company, how you focus the people and how you shift the mindset from basic research, from explorative to not exploitation, I would say, more to focus on a single goal. How do you do that?
Very interesting. Typically, the process has different steps, and I will go throughout all the steps now. The step, you might think that it starts with a scientific discovery of something. you find out that a molecule can be very efficacious, for example, to solve, I don't know, a brain tumor, okay? And this idea might come because you're the scientist and you just found out that this could be used there. Or it may come because you're interested in the problem and you license it in from someone else that joins into the company. But it could be theoretically even a prior step, which would be defining the problem you want to solve and start investigating, okay? We typically never do that, but some funds in the States define problems and then they put everybody at work to make it happen, to find a solution for a specific disease or using a specific modality, etc. But let's assume that you are the scientist, you have come up with a research result that is very promising, not amazing yet, very promising at first to solve a particular disease, okay? So first of all, you need to try it. Probably you have tried it in vitro, then you have tried it in animal models. It still works. Oh, you're encouraged now. You start looking for financing because and then you talk to VCs. You try to raise a pre-Series A round or a seed round, right? With an amount of money that's limited, but will allow you to move forward into the process, and then you go in more preclinical studies, both, first until you nominate a lead candidate to move forward. And then once you have your lead candidate nominated because you think, now that's the product, I did all the chemistry modifications, I tested all the PK, PD, and its effect and everything, right? And you think that could be a drug, okay? Then you need to start the next step, which are regulatory preclinical, which is, you consult with the regulatory authorities and they ask you for things about safety, in animal models, we're not still in humans, right? Safety, toxicology, oncogenicity studies, immunogenicity studies, blah, blah, blah. You name them. It's not the technical things that you need to do what matter, but to see that there's a process. You have an idea or a result, then you test it until you refine it, you nominate your lead candidate, you move it forward, this lead candidate, into the preclinical regulatory, and then eventually you complete everything that the FDA or the EMA has asked you, right? And you submit an IND to get to first in human. That means you're asking basically permission to the regulatory agencies to test your drug for the first time in a human being. And that is a very dramatic moment. I remember every time that one of my companies is at that stage, I may not sleep that night, because you never know. A human is very different from an animal, right? But then you start what is called the phase 1. And the phase 1, it's a small study, typically, 20 patients. It depends on the indication and the modality, but could be as small as 20 patients, where you just are looking for safety. You're not even looking for efficacy. And I said patients because I typically invest in cell therapy and gene therapy, and they are typically patients. But sometimes they are even healthy individuals that offer, they offer themselves to test a new drug, right? So in this phase 1, you end up by having data about the safety profile of the drug. If the safety profile is okay, then you may move. You again ask permission to the regulatory agencies to move into phase 2. And the phase 2 is already done on patients always, because you're looking then for efficacy. Okay. And efficacy, of course, you still are looking for safety, but it's efficacy in a very homogeneous group of patients. So in a way, it's not cheating, but it's easier because you're defining like a target patient that you're defining your inclusion criteria. And then the patient is very homogeneous and sometimes it works, right? But then you still need to do what is called the phase 3, which is a much more larger study in a much more heterogeneous population, where you test the drug in all types of patients. If at the end of the phase 3, sometimes even at the end of phase 2, you can achieve an accelerated approval. If you're trying to solve something really important and the results are quite convincing, you may get the authorization from the FDA or the EMA or the regulatory agency to put your drug in the market. But even if you put your drug in the market, you still are required to do this phase 3. So the phase 3 would be the last step. There's a phase 4 afterwards, which is post marketing authorization. Post being in the market already, you still need to be looking what happens with patients, and those would be the steps. I hope they weren't too technical. I tried to explain them in a very nice and smooth way, but it's a technical process, and you need to follow some rules. We're testing drugs in humans. People might die if we don't do things well. So it needs to be extra careful. Safety first, always.
That's true. Couldn't agree more. It's very important. And when you have selected then a technology like this paper with the scientists, where say might have the potential to turn into a company, and you can imagine that these scientists also have the qualities to be the leaders initially in the company. I think one of the most important points then is to define the end point in the development 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and select the right direction of the company, which is a lot of guesswork, in my opinion. My question to you is, how does your process look like? How do you guess the future of a company's success? How do you select the right targets? How do you select the right direction to set up the company?
Yeah, that is not a question. That's the question, right, Chris? Because at the end of the day, and I'm going to try to answer in a very humble way, because again, every investor has its own rules, its own recipe, but I'm very happy to share how do I think about an opportunity to consider it really an opportunity and not just a good idea, and that's all, right? And because I think it's going to surprise you that I don't start looking into the company, and I will explain myself. I really like the analogy. I use a lot the analogy of the tree and the forest to understand what I'm about to explain in why do I choose the companies I choose, right? And typically, many investors are looking into companies as if they were trees, right? You receive a company that comes to see you and asking for money. You receive hundreds of them, but then there are some companies that you look at them and you see, wow, this company has very strong roots. and a very wide trunk, and look at the leaves. They are very green. And look at the stature of this tree just 1 year after being planted. You see, I'm going to invest in this tree. Okay, I don't put a lot of attention in the tree, at least at the very beginning. I put more attention on where this tree is planted in the forest. Is it in the sunny side of the forest with lots of sun, lots of water because a river is nearby? And I think the tree is going to grow healthy. Or is it in the dark side of the forest, no sun there, lots of rocks, no water nearby? This tree is not going to grow. You know what I mean? And this forest, to me, then it's, again, going back to what I was saying before, the modality in which I want to invest and the indication in which I want to invest. Are they planted? Are you? Oh, you're yeah.
Yes, I've just found it on in your book. I think you're talking about this part of the book.
That's exactly correct. Yes. So the forest is what I call here the technology landscape, or I mean, based on all things. For example, when we had the COVID vaccine, okay, there were many vaccines competing. There were mRNA vaccines. Some others were vaccines more in the traditional sense. There were many modalities that were moving forward. But if you want to invest in one of them, you need to make sure that the one you are investing in is the modality that will be in the future of medicine, right? So that would be the modality. If I believe it's going to be in the future of medicine, that's a modality that is planted in the right side of the forest. You know what I mean? But before looking into the company, I want an RNA vaccine. Okay. And once I decided that I want an RNA vaccine, then I look about the quality of the tree. There are several trees or companies I could invest in, and I start analyzing them. Okay. But the process starts with the forest, not with the tree. Okay. And then when looking into the tree, I just need three things. Of course, I'm oversimplifying things, Christian, but I need many things to happen, but there are three that are non-negotiable. I mean, what we do as investors is difficult enough to really overcomplicate things, right? So I want three things. One, the clinical need that we are trying to solve needs to be important, okay? And to be important, it needs to be unsolved in a way, right? Or partially solved by other technologies or other drugs that are not very effective yet, right? Because if you are betting on something that there are drugs that are very effective now in solving the same problem, the FDA is going to ask you to have two branches. I mean, one branch with the old, because it's very effective. The control group is going to have the old the treatment that already works. And then you will have a second branch with your treatment added to the old one, because you cannot risk the life of the patient. You know what I'm saying. So it needs to be unsolved. Otherwise, it gets too complicated. You need very large ends in clinical trials to make things happen, because the difference between what your drug adds to the well-being of the patient and what you already got is very small. And that means, by definition, a very large sample of patients being tested. That means lots of money being invested, blah, blah, blah. You get the point. So first point, high clinical need. Second point, I need what I called a wow slide. Okay, we always typically invest in a company based on typically one slide. It's one or two slides, right? One result that fascinated us, and that shows the potential of this drug, if correctly developed, to help patients and change the natural history of the disease. Okay, so and this would be like the second point. And the third thing I need, it needs to be easy to prove. And by easy, I mean, if I always imagine somebody comes and they tell me, look, I have an RNA therapy to solve the problem. I don't care about I don't know, about epilepsy, right? And will it be easy to prove or difficult to prove? And I always try to imagine the endpoint that we'll be using in the phase 2. Okay. And the endpoint, imagine, for example, I want to solve schizophrenia. And of course, we need drugs for schizophrenia. Don't misunderstand me. But if you want to make things simple, schizophrenia will have an endpoint in the phase 2, which is very subjective. It needs to be evaluated by someone else. You will need a very long study. Whereas, for example, epilepsy, I chose the right example for this. It's super straightforward. I mean, how many crises did the patient have tomorrow? I mean, prior to the treatment, he had, 20 crises per day. How many after the treatment? So it's very straightforward and easy to prove, right? So the combination of these three things, in my humble opinion, I think is very powerful. Then after that, there's lots of considerations to be made about IP, about the structure of the company, about the clinical path, the regulatory framework, you name it, the market access. I mean, how many patients are how would you deploy this into the market, etc. Right? But if you start with these three, at least you start the whole process with a very solid foundation, that this might happen, right? And that's how we invest. Yeah. So and this was one part of the question, because the other part of the question is, how do you predict the future, right?
Yeah.
And that's even more difficult to answer. And in fact, you could say that the book I wrote that you were mentioning tries to answer that. It's the whole book, Christian. So it's very difficult to summarize this in just a couple of minutes, right? But let me tell you that some things that I find very useful. You need to start understanding outcomes not as binary, but as probability distributions. And I know I just lost half of the audience here, but if you see outcomes as binary, as success or failure, you're missing the point, because there's a lot of noise in everything we do, lots of decisions that could have gone wrong or right. So to predict the future, you need to start thinking about probability distributions. And you need to bet for the projects that have the biggest area of luck involved, if you know what I mean. Plan for luck as well, right? Things that might happen and that could add value into the company, right? And that's choosing things where the area of luck is bigger and eschews the abstraction. Then we use as well, we think algorithmically. I try to explain this in the book. We use a lot of data science because, of course, everywhere there's noise, but there's signal to it. You use statistics to try to understand trends. And for example, I don't know, we typically, I'm revealing now things that are quite proprietary, but I don't care. I think they could be useful. For example, we code an application that tries to follow the first 15 days after an IPO for a specific indication or for a specific modality, etc. Because the behavior of a company 1 year after the IPO depends on how good is the CEO and how well are things going, right? But the market sentiment about the trend, the first days after an IPO, you see, what is the eagerness of other investors to jump into that wagon, etc. So I try to monitorize these things very obsessively, probably. Mm-hmm. I'm a bit nerd in that. But I think lots of things can be predicted just by using statistics, or now even better, artificial intelligence. I love to code, by the way. I never mentioned that to you, but I code myself. It relaxes me exactly as art relaxes me. Code as well relaxes me. And you can do very beautiful things. There's one question that maybe we're rambling again. It's outside the scope of this podcast, but I'm very interested in the question: can the stock market be predicted?
What's your opinion?
Well, there are people that think that the stock market is what they call a random walk. Okay, so it cannot be predicted. And there's people that believe, including myself, that of course it can be predicted. It's only that you're missing the point here. I mean, the answer, whether the stock market can be predicted or not, I think is very clear, because if you look at the list of the 50 largest and most successful hedge funds in the world, I would say more than 40 are quants, meaning that they try to predict using statistics. So it is obvious that, of course, it can be predicted. But the point here is you are not trying to predict the behavior of a company. You're trying to predict the behavior of people, which is very different. I mean, when something, for example, you could run the statistics. What happens if I would invest in every company that drops in the same day 30%? Because people get scared and people act in a specific way, and you can predict how these people will act when the share has lost 30% of its value. And then you do the math, you run the statistics, and you come up with the conclusion that I won't say if it's good or bad to invest, because that's not the point, right? But you can confidently invest in every company every day that it drops 30%. You invest. Would you be right every time? Of course not. But if you invest 100 times, the law of big numbers will do the rest, because you will be right more than wrong more times, and you will make money. This is not investment advice. Let me warn the audience. This is just discussing whether whether the stock market can be predicted or not, whether there's noise or there's signal, or what's the ratio of noise and signal there, right? But I've studied this obsessively in the last years. And I can tell you, in my humble opinion, it can certainly be predicted. Yes.
I think Peter Lynch would agree to what you say in the long term. If he wrote in this book, if I remember it right, in One Up on Wall Street, that the stock market long term is easy to predict. But he said not in the short term. He said in 6 to 12 months.
That is very true as well. Yes, that is very true as well. Because maybe this drop in 30%, it needs months to get back to where it was. But if it reverts back to the mean, right, maybe you need to wait. But you are very right, Christian. Every strategy that I tried to predict the market in the very short term, sometimes even I tried everything, even minutes, right? They tend not to work. Yeah.
I tried this trading. I had when the social trading came up with like Wikifolio platform, eToro, something platform. eToro is also such a platform. The great thing was that there is a system that simulates the stock market without the need putting money into it, and which is publicly available and observable. And trading strategies, I tried it in 2015 and 16. It never worked for me. So it's something like sell at this point and repeat it. It's a lot of work, and you can code it.
But it's a fair question that you may ask yourself. I mean, that's curiosity. That's science precisely, right? I mean, if you wonder what would happen if I invest in all the companies that do, you might reach some conclusions that are interesting and by the way, interesting and profitable. So. Yeah.
It's a learning curve. Let's go back to what you said before for the entrepreneurs who are listening on to the show, which might be interesting. You mentioned the wow slide, and there are 2 points that I would like to emphasize a little bit. I think this is a point that sometimes when you look at the market and when people talk to me about ideas, mRNA, you brought it up, I think in the pandemic, suddenly there were so many mRNA companies on the market, and scientists who said, okay, I have an idea also in that space, vaccine, and we can cure this and that, which were completely similar to what is on the market already. I think this is sometimes a point that I feel might not be well understood, that a company, an entrepreneur needs to be a contrarian themselves. So they also need something that's new.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. I mean, to start a company, I would say almost all the time you need to be a little bit contrarian. I mean, you cannot escape that. Because, for example, if I look at the problem from a venture capital investor, if we are a small fund, small funds typically invest earlier, Big funds typically invest later, right? So big funds are more used to investing in things when markets are really established because, yeah, they invest at another stage. But for the early stages, you really need, because it takes a lot of time to get there. If you invest in a Me Too at an early stage, once you get there, the problem is going to be solved already. You know what I mean? So it doesn't make sense. So I would encourage entrepreneurs, yes, indeed, to be contrarians. They need to.
How do you, you need unique personalities in a fund. You need a team in a fund at the end of the day. And the setting is quite unique. You need to be contrarian. You don't need to be scared. Failure will happen. So it's unlike school. How do you select teams? What kind of personalities are you looking for your portfolio, for your funding teams?
Yeah. Look, the older I get, the more I just want just two things. Okay, because technicalities, you can train the individual. There are many things that can be trained, but I look, when I interview a new candidate for an analyst position or maybe it's for senior positions, right? I try to look two things. One, I want people in our team that bring clarity. Okay, and two, I want people that bring drive. And let me explain both concepts because they might look like a bit abstract, but by clarity, of course, communication skills are super important in our field. You are all the time talking. You need to be very clear in what you're asking and very to the point. But it's not only communication skills. It's more importantly is this ability that some people have, some others don't, of reducing complexity into clear statements. Okay. Our problems are typically difficult, right? So I want someone that when comes into the room, he brings clarity to what we're discussing, not that brings noise, because then we won't solve the problem that we're trying to solve. Okay. And there's another concept. It's clarity. Of course, it's communication skills. It's reducing complexity into clear statements, as I said. And the last step of this clarity is what I call to have a voice. And every time I tell one of the young analysts, you need to develop your voice, no one understands me. But the senior team and the partners, they all know how important it is right now. Having a voice means being able to stand up at the board and say something with clarity, sometimes against everyone else. Okay? But if it's in our best interest, you need to do that, right? So this voice, you need to develop that voice. And and the second quality, because this was about clarity, a little bit more about drive, right? These people, I love people that work with me that I need them to be self-driven by curiosity. Okay, it's not me like saying you need to do this. That's so boring. They need to add value spontaneously to company. They need to have like the desire to not just think but do. Right? There's when you just jump into a building, right? Imagine you need to go to the third floor. Okay, that's something that I typically observe without saying nothing, right? But you need to go to the third floor. And some people get to the lobby and take the elevator, right? Some other people just climb the stairs. But then there are those who climb the stairs two at a time. You know what I mean? These are the ones that interest me. They cannot wait. They need to be upstairs now because they are thrilled to be there. These are the people that I want with us, because the rest, of course, clarity and drive equals as well some sort of intelligence, right? But it is not about the technicalities. Are they fluent in RNA therapies? Well, I prefer them to be, but if they are not, I prefer these qualities because I can train them to be fluent in RNA therapies. You know what I mean? So, but the other, I cannot train them really that much. So I need to focus on this type of people. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this both parts that you said, but especially the first one, the voice. I think this is an important part, especially for the young people. And I heard a similar story when I was in merger acquisition over 20 years ago, a board meeting, all important and very intelligent and smart and experienced people. And I asked the person next to me, should I say that? And she said, yeah, I should. Because, I mean, you might point at one problem that nobody else sees. If you're wrong, they will tell you, but you need to speak up. And the story that you said, I think this is important.
There's nothing wrong with being wrong. I mean, hopefully it will be many other people at the board discussing. And if you are really intelligent and the type of people that I want, you will realize, oh, maybe you're right. I mean, I was wrong. But you need to speak up because you cannot live with the doubt, right? And if I may, to complement what you were saying, because I just came up with some sort of matrix that I want to test with you now. Again, a 2x2 matrix. But you asked me specifically for my team, but somehow the C-level executives of our portfolio companies, as we invest very early, we typically decide on them most of the time, especially the CEO, right? But in general, like the C-level executive. Our rule is the CEO has the full power to build their teams. I don't want to know anything about it. I mean, it's his or her responsibility. But if he's hiring a C-level executive, that means a chief medical officer, a chief financial officer, these type of profiles, I want to have a say, right? So when trying to hire these people, of course, there are these same qualities apply, but there are other qualities that come into play. So the answers would be a little bit different, especially in the case of the CEO, for example. I want people that has done this in the past. This is not, I mean, sometimes we can accept someone that hasn't, right? But if you have done it in the past, you have developed a drug, moved into clinics, and sold the company. This is seniority that we love, right? And a very big network and the ability to connect the dots with pharma companies, etc. Right? But I just realized that they are like, I mean, you could build like a 2x2 matrix on how good are people at their jobs, right? And I mean, on output or intelligence. You may even call it intelligence. I don't like to call it intelligence. Let's call it output, right? So low output, very high output. That would be one of the axes. And the other axis would be low trust, high trust. I mean, people that are difficult, right? Or people that are very easy to work with, that you really do a teamwork very well, etc. Right? So it is clear that people with low output and difficult to work with because you don't trust them, I mean, you don't want them, right? I mean, in that we agree. And it is very clear as well, the other opposite quadrant, where you have someone with a very large, very good output and very easy to work with. You trust him or her a lot. These are the guys that you want the most, okay? But the problem is in life, you find very few people in that quadrant. You find more people in the other two quadrants. So what comes first, trust or intelligence or output, right? Some people can be very difficult, but they are incredibly intelligent and their output is amazing. And some people are not that intelligent, however, you trust them a lot. So which one should you focus on? And I'm sorry, because this is going to be maybe with counterintuitive, but I think we should, as managing partners of funds or when hiring people from companies, we should aim to hire people with a very solid output, even if trust is not that high. You know why? Because the trust issue is something, it is my responsibility. I mean, if I don't handle them well, I need to learn better how to handle them well. Because if I manage to handle, I mean, if I learn to deal with what I call, in a very good sense, prima donnas, meaning people that are really spectacular in their output, but they are picky, they are difficult to work with, they fight with other teammates. But if you know what they want, and you know how to, because these guys or women, typically they want recognition, they want space, freedom to accomplish their goals. But if you find the right environment for them to work, they can bring so much value to your fund or into the company you're investing in or whatever. So I think it's more intelligent to focus on the people that have a very solid output rather than people that, yeah, I trust him so much. Maybe he's not that good, but no, it's not enough. What we do is very difficult. We are caring for patients ultimately, and we need to make it happen. So let's focus on the people that can make it happen, and let's train ourselves to manage those people in a good way, to have everyone happy. So that's my 2 cents. It was an interesting question, this one. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's 3 dimension. I think it's 3 areas. Then it's trust, it's output, and the question whether they are more on the a solo player or a team player. So you have, I think, 3 dimensions to balance in your decision making: output, trustworthiness,
Yeah, you could see
and team players.
maybe it's a 3-dimensional matrix then.
Interesting perspective. How do you select the CEO then within this matrix?
Well, I certainly
3 dimensions.
there's a very famous quote from, this is not mine, this is from, I think it was Warren Buffett. Okay, but what I want in a CEO is for him or her to be, of course, smart, hard worker, and honest.
Mm.
But especially the last one, honest. Because if he's not honest, the other 2 qualities are incredibly dangerous. You know what I mean? So in a way, I'm generalizing. I'm just making the point that output is important as well. But of course, trust matters. So it's a balance at the end of the day. There's not like an arrow that points exactly what do you want, right? You need to feel comfortable, but at the same time, you need someone with a very solid output. Otherwise, you won't accomplish great things.
At this point, I would love to hear your opinion on a concept that I have read very often in the biography of Tim Cook and the biography of Elon Musk. It's radical candor. It's honesty. It's truth
I
seeking.
love that concept. I use it a lot. And that comes, by the way, from medicine as well. That's a very good point, because when you need to communicate a family that their relative has died at the operating room, it happens often, right? You need to go out and you need to communicate. And physicians will receive a training on how to communicate this bad news. And basically, if I'm allowed to summarize the training in just one sentence, is you just communicate with candidness. You don't want to ramble there. Your first sentence is, your relative has died. And then after that, you elaborate more, but you don't want to keep them waiting for this sentence, so you need to open with this. So radical I think when you have something important to say, you need to say it in a candid way, but in a very straightforward way, just as it is. And I think you could say that probably, of course, as an investor, we receive we receive more than analyze, like 1,000 projects per year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we invest in 5 per year. So that's 995 no's. Okay. And you need to communicate that with candor. And as you can imagine, I'm not in a popularity contest. Okay. And that's what it is. But yeah, I accept that. And there's no problem. And if you communicate with candor, I think there's never a problem. I mean, you just explain why you're not investing, and that's it. You give advice always to improve the company, and that is worth it as well. So
I think Warren Buffett citing is always a good thing. And also Steve Jobs, I think he said something like, if you want to please everybody, sell ice cream, but don't build a company. And I think it must be emphasized that the startup world and scale-up world is one of radical candor. People will tell you straight in the face when something doesn't work, and you need to have to deal with that. You need to
kindness. With kindness, of course, and with respect. But yes, tell straightforward what you are aiming to communicate. Yeah.
and hard work. So it's not we just want to work 20 hours per week space. It's more the we want to change the world space and dedicate our lives to that.
I mean, in all honesty, I never discuss how much. I mean, how many hours should a CEO devote to a company? Because it's an absurd question. It's 24/7. You know what I mean? I mean, I couldn't care less about the hours that he's at the or she's at the office, or because he's always thinking about the company. That's what I want. So I don't even negotiate about the amount of hours. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I was never very much into this part-time CEO idea that someone can do that part-time. But this leads me to the next question. There is this term work-life balance, and they always said, I mean, a talent who is passionate, who wants to change the world, dedicates his life or her life to the company, and usually is not one that they have to motivate to spend 30 or 40 hours in the company. It's more that they have to worry about them not burning out, that they don't cross biological boundaries.
I had an interview with a CEO of a company in Australia a few weeks ago, because what you said just reminded me of this, and I think it's funny and interesting. And the meeting was on a Sunday. At my mid-Sunday, and it was like 10 at night in Australia, or 11 at night in Australia. The guy was at the lab, pipetting things into the lab while he was talking to me, and he was the CEO. I mean, this is I immediately was, I mean, this is the right CEO for this company, for sure. But it's not for being a workaholic. It's because you need to reconcile, of course, your private, don't misunderstand me. There's space for everything, but somehow a CEO is all the time thinking about it. It's like a kid. You are not working for your kid 8 hours a day. It's a whole day, even if you rest, but you're still caring for him, right? So companies are the same.
What advice would you give entrepreneurs when you feel that they are on the edge of burning out because they just ignore the biological boundaries, neglect sleep, neglect exercise, neglect family life, and just are there for the company all the time, 24/7, in the sense that they cut out everything else? I think that the problem there that can appear is that you lose, that they get lost, they just burn out, and then they're gone. And with them, decision-making power, with them, know-how, knowledge. What advice would you give entrepreneurs? How should they balance their life that they avoid this scenario?
I thought very deeply about that. This is an important question, Christian, and it's very difficult for me to give a straightforward advice, because I would tell you that it depends tremendously on every individual. I mean, every human being is different. And I would need to understand what is her drive or his drive, and what is he trying to accomplish, and what is the nature of the problem. But I have I spend a lot of time with the CEOs of my companies, meaning that I invite them for lunches or for dinners all the time. Okay, so of course it's on a rotation basis, because otherwise it would be the death for me, right? But I try to know them on a more personal basis, precisely to be able to help in those situations. But I'm sorry, I cannot give you a straightforward answer like there's a magic recipe that you should try to reconcile. No, it's difficult. It depends on every case. But at the end of the day, I think my best advice for them would be, okay, take it easy, in the sense that nothing is that important at the end of the day. We're trying. We have you as a CEO, not guaranteeing the final result, but your expertise, your network, and your drive, right? It's like a surgery. I mean, you don't ask the surgeon for curing the patient. No, you just ask for his hands, right? I mean, his expertise, sometimes the patient dies. Yeah, sometimes company fail. And yeah, well, that happens, and he needs to focus on execution and trying to at least alleviate this backpack full of stones, oh, what happens if I fail? Okay, don't, because that's a reason for burnouts as well. Being too stressed about maybe I will fail. Okay, well, let's try that not to happen, but just don't think about it. I mean, just live your life. I don't know. But again, it's very specific on the individual, so I cannot give a magic recipe. But it's an important question that I need to answer with every single one of CEOs. Yes.
Would you see that as an investor's responsibility, as a board member's responsibility, to also have that perspective on the company in general?
Oh, I think so. I think so. You need, because 80% of the problems you will face inside the company are human related. That's the truth. So yeah.
So your medical background then is of great help, I guess, in also managing people. There's one question that I get frequently on the market, especially from young biotech leaders. It's the question about fundraising and investor relations, and it's always popping up every few years. And I would like to hear your opinion on that. When is the right time for a new biotech leader in the making to approach investors? Should they only go out on the market when they need money? Should they go out earlier? Should they pitch loose ideas? Do they need to have a fixed pitch deck already with everything laid out in a business plan? In your opinion, what's the right point in time to start approaching investors as someone who wants to build a scientific company?
Yes, that's a very fair question. And it depends on, I mean, there's a prior question that's even more important than this one. It's not only about when, but about choosing the right VCs to go visit, okay? Because if you are very early stage and you're going to early stage VCs, and this is my case, I typically invest, I told you before, sometimes out of a paper. So you cannot get earlier than that, right? So it's super early. I would advise them to go, the sooner the better. We are not, I mean, we welcome talking with entrepreneurs all the time. Again, they're super interesting people, super intelligent, trying to solve very difficult problems. It may happen that it's not the right moment for us to invest, or the idea is not enough, but this first contact, I really welcome it. So maybe it's not going to be me meeting them, but somebody from the team will be meeting them, you know? And but that's for early stage investors. If you're a late stage investor, of course, if you have an idea, don't go see them, because it doesn't make sense, you know? They will look, I mean, you need to do some research first into the investors you might want to approach, right? Because the ones that clearly state in their websites that we only invest in phase 2 companies onwards, it doesn't make sense to go there. So first study your audience, but then if you're early stage, go and see the early stage funds. If you have an interesting pitch, go see them. We don't eat anyone, you know, I mean, we are respectful with ideas. We love entrepreneurs and we love to listen to them. So there's no problem.
And generally are nice people. I think one point that I would like to emphasize from what you said is do your market research. Look into what the fund, I mean, it's very easy these days, websites, internet, podcasts, LinkedIn profiles, so the information is accessible. This is one thing. And then there is also a habit that seems to be on the market that sometimes companies think they need an intermediary to reach out to investors. So this is, you have a list of investors, send our pitch deck to the list via automated email sometimes. How do you see this practice of the CEO not directly approaching investors, but using other people to go out on the market?
That's, in early stage at least, it's completely nonsense. I mean, I don't want someone talking about I'm the CEO, I want to speak to the CEO directly, you know. So it doesn't make much sense to me to really have intermediaries. Of course, once the company is starting to get bigger and bigger and you're a CEO that has many people working for you, you may have, of course, your chief business development officer or your CFO that approaches investors on your behalf, but you will always be summoned at some point during the interactions, right? but especially in early stage that teams are small in size, I would never recommend anyone to use an intermediary. If you're a CEO, you're the one coming and seeing this. Yeah.
So I think the big lesson there is it should be a C-level executive. Contract is one part, another part to discuss, but it should be someone deeply involved with the company and with the intention to be part of the team.
Absolutely, yes. The one presenting, if I'm understanding well your question, you're asking me the one that it comes see us.
Mm.
Yeah, no, it needs to be the company, no one else.
Mm.
No one else.
I read in the morning in your book that you haven't been pitched in an elevator yet, if I remember it right. And
correct. And they keep on calling this the elevator pitch, but I've never been. Yeah, I've never been pitched there. But yeah, it's an interesting way of calling something the elevator pitch. But yeah, there's a structure to the elevator pitch, and if you do it right, you might really capture the attention of the investor. So you need to focus on delivering a clear message. We go back to clarity again, So yeah, that's how it works, I'm afraid.
What is a tip that you could give founders about how to craft a compelling narrative that resonates with you?
You are very right in the first place that every investment is a story. Okay, so the narrative is very important, right? And I would suggest very quickly, because I think every company is different, but you need several advices. First, you need to start with the why. Okay, why are you doing this? So open with the why. That means defining the problem, right? Then after that, you need to talk about the solution that you bring into the marketplace, right? How elegant it is. And then after describing what are you trying to do, you need to talk a little bit about the science. The best results that you had. We measured this in this animal model, and it showed a 20% increase in the muscle strength, whatever, right? Then after that, you need to tell the investor, and we are competing in this market, okay, against these competitors. And look, by the way, this is my unique selling proposition, meaning this is why it's going to be me and not the rest of the competitors. You see, there's like a flow. There's, why am I doing this? This is a problem, but I'm coming with this solution. This solution has these results in science. I am competing in this market against these guys, but I am the one that will solve this problem because this and that and then. Then you need to clearly state at which stage you are, where are you right now with the idea and your future plans. Then I recommend always to tease a little bit the investor, appealing to his or her greediness. You explain a little bit how hot is the field, right? Just with a few sentences, maybe name dropping some comparable exits that have happened recently or whatever. Then finally, the most important part, you talk about yourself and the team. And I leave it for last typically because it's so important that you need to leave the investor with that team in mind. But it needs, of course, to be an outstanding team. Why you, right? And finally, you do the ask. You ask for something. And if it's an elevator pitch, again, not in an elevator, you would ask something like, what is the best way to put ourselves in your calendar, right? Are you interested in having a longer meeting for us to explain in detail? But ask for something, because you need to ask. If you are already at that meeting, that first meeting, then you need to end by explaining how much money do you want to raise. But not only how much money do you want to raise, but also where this money is going to get us. This money is going to be used in this, and at the end, we will be here, right? And this needs to craft like a compelling story for the investor. Another advice, very important, expect extremely knowledgeable audience in front of you. Even if you think you're the best in the world and you feel, and you probably are, expect your audience to know very deeply about, because they would have studied in advance, all the analysts would have studied extensively what you're trying to accomplish, and the questions will be difficult. Okay, so don't go there like thinking, oh, but that they don't understand the science. No, you're wrong. I mean, we are science driven. Everything we do is ultimately extremely science driven. So yeah, think about that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And from big picture down to details, I think this is important. You wrote it, I think, also in your book that you need a situation for 1 minute, is a story for 5 minutes, a story for 2 hours, and you need to tailor it.
But all the steps are essentially the same as the ones that I mentioned: why, the problem, the solution, the science, the market, the competition. Because at the end of the day, you need to cover everything to make your story. You need to tell a story, and it needs to be a compelling story indeed. Yes.
At the end of our recording, let's talk a little bit about the future. Where do you see, I mean, with the advancement of artificial intelligence, it's out there, ChatGPT, Gemini, and also other tools are coming to the market. How do you see the role of VCs evolving in the next decade with these new possibilities?
I mean, nobody's safe here. I mean, everyone is at risk here. I think AI is going to be the major change in human. We are on the verge of an historic shift. Okay, and this historic shift is going to happen in this next decade, if not in the next 5 years. So I'm afraid we are that close. If I may, I mean, as you know, I have a PhD in neuroscience, and I used to be a neurosurgeon, so I know a few things about the brain, right? And I know I was wrong during my whole life. I was wrong about the brain in the sense that I thought that the brain was complex, because for being intelligent, you need the brain to be extremely complex. Otherwise, you can. So I thought we could never be able to replicate a brain because it was so complex. It was not doable, right? Well, it looks like I was wrong, obviously. And that's because the brain is not complex because it needs to be, but because evolution cannot go backwards. So you add layers upon layers on top of layers of retro feedback, forward feedback, just to learn things, right? And it ends up by being extremely complex. But actually, intelligence is pure math, and we're seeing this very clearly with large language models, and now models of the world with recent models that are coming, right? And I think the world is going to change, and the field of venture capital, that was your question, is going to change dramatically. I coded my own AI. There are videos in Twitter and LinkedIn. You can check them if you want to. But I coded like a bot that is training 24/7. Actually, she's not training at my place nonstop, right? Reading everything that's published in the Nature, Science, New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet. I mean, all the magazines, all the news, all the deals that come to the market, every transaction, every book. I mean, it has an automatic way of feeding herself, and she's working, right? And we can dialogue with her. And now, I'm not sure if you saw the last model presented by both Google and OpenAI, where you can chat directly. I mean, at the end of the day, we will see digital workers. Okay, but when I say the word worker, I mean a digital analyst that has a personality that you can interact with. And this we're going to see immediately. We're not going to wait 5 years for that. It means in 2025, we will have digital workers. I wonder, there's a question that everybody's asking: when will we have the first unicorn company with just one employee? That's a question that I think was Elon Musk asking this. And he's so right, because one CEO and then 100 of digital co-workers doing all the things, interacting with the world. And ultimately, of course, the very same CEO can be as well an artificial intelligence, right? But ultimately, I don't really know, to be honest with your question, because how will it be when we talk to an agent that is smarter than us? I mean, a human with an intellect with an IQ of 100 typically does not understand what a math genius with a 200 IQ is doing, right? It's very difficult for them to communicate. So I see no reason why IQ should stop at the human station. I think these models will become smarter than us, indeed, right? So how will it be to talk to a 1,000 IQ or a 10,000 IQ agent? And it is so unpredictable. So ultimately, the right answer for me to give very humbly is I don't know, because I don't think anyone knows. All I know is we are on the verge of something really, really big. And we are very fortunate to be there, because imagine the privilege. I mean, we are at an era where everything is going to change. So
as long as they don't start looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger, we are safe. So it's
that's yeah. But I'm more worried at first in social disruption, because I bet we're going to see demonstration on streets asking politicians to stop AI because it's taking away the jobs. I mean, we will see that.
You think so? I mean, I remember the 90s. There was also the fear that the internet will take away jobs and jobs will be lost. And I think it was 10 years ago when a lot of data solutions started coming on the market, who said, okay, you don't need to talk to people anymore. You just can go to this or that database and you get the answers.
Oh, but that is not true. I mean, when somebody tells me, look, with the internet, everybody said that this was going to change the world, and it has, but not that much. I mean, why the hype, right? I mean, let's pay attention for a second. What were we outsourcing in the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century? Muscles, right? I mean, we were outsourcing our muscles. We were outsourcing the production of things to machines, okay? Mm-hmm. What were we outsourcing in the era of computers? Well, doing math, executing algorithms, this stuff, right? What have we been outsourcing in the era of the internet? Well, eyes and ears, because now we can hear and know about everywhere in the world. What are we outsourcing with the AI revolution, Christian? Our brains. And there's nothing beyond that. This is the ultimate step, because from there on, if we really succeed and artificial superintelligence is possible, then the very same artificial superintelligence will create the next version of itself. We will not longer be in the loop. And that creates very big ethical dilemmas.
I think there are two possibilities, in my opinion, when I look at sci-fi, science fiction literature, for example. So one is the cut the humans out of the process. But then when I look at this scenario, I think, but the basic of the economy is people interacting with others. So if we take the humans out of the equation, you have an economy that is not connected to humanity anymore. It will be an economy by itself, but it's not serving humans, and humans still have the need that they need to interact with each other. And when I ponder this thought, I come to the picture that I say, what if artificial intelligence enhances humanity so that the same people keep working together, but 1,000 times more productive and have 1,000 workers at?
Maybe that's one future scenario, or maybe biological intelligence is just a bootstrap across the universe for artificial intelligence, and the ultimate state is artificial intelligence. So I don't know, but the meaning of us here, it's like wishful thinking, right? But I want us, the human beings, to be meaningful. So we will need to find new sources of meaning and new sources of happiness now that we can outsource intelligence to other forms of intelligence, that are not human. This is a very crucial moment for humanity, indeed.
Then we're coming back to arts, to the expression of humanity, emotion.
Indeed.
Luis, it's fantastic talking to you, and I could really go on for another hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. You are such an interesting personality. Let me ask you the question, which topics would you like to touch in the last minutes? Is there anything open that you would like to tackle?
No, I think I loved all the questions that you asked. They are very relevant. And I think we could debate on so many things. Maybe one of the things that would be interesting is the ethical dilemmas we're going to face. It's like, we're going to face ethical dilemmas all the way from now until the AI comes, and even with gene therapy as well, right? Because there are many things that we don't know. For example, what are the limits of gene therapy? Or does an AI have moral rights? Or these type of questions, they are so intimately linked to the leading edge space, and to deep tech, that you cannot invest in deep tech without asking your responsibility in this type of questions, because you're contributing, each one of us is contributing a little bit into a future. And it looks like to me sometimes that we're moving forward without a map. We don't know where we're heading. No one is regulating anything. Regulators always lag behind scientists and entrepreneurs. And but at the same time, it's very difficult to have a plan because everything is so new. But yeah, ethical dilemmas are going to be very present in our lives in the coming years. Yes.
Let me ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Let me ask you this question to what you said. If you could define the North Star, the endpoint in 2044, and you are the only one who can define the map to the endpoint, how would this tool look like? Where do you see the future of humanity in 20 years?
Wow. I'm speechless because very honestly, I don't have an answer to that question. What I think is that we will coexist with forms of intelligence that were not evolved by nature. It will become absolutely normal to coexist with them. We will live with them. I hope we will live with them in a way that, as you said, it's a win-win for both sides. When we discuss about consciousness, for example, would those agents, because they will have the form of a robot or whatever, right? But those agents in the world, one fair question would be, but they are machines, they are not conscious, right? Well, maybe we are machines as well, only that biological, in the sense that, with all respect, Christian, I cannot know whether you're conscious or not. I don't have direct access to your consciousness, right? But however, I assume you're conscious. Why? Because you look like you are, you act in the world like you are, right? Well, those agents will act in the world as they are. So the question whether they are conscious or not is irrelevant, because they will look like. And besides that, there's no such thing of consciousness 0, consciousness 1, on, off. Nothing is conscious or not conscious. There are degrees of consciousness. Yes, a stone is 0. That's right. But all the rest is a worm with 300 neurons, 302 specifically, C. elegans, right? We can assume, all of us, that it's a living being, right? Because it approaches food, it goes away from fire, and he's alive, it's alive, right? And he's conscious. How can I not consider that large language models, these ones or in the future, won't be at least conscious in some degree, having billions and billions, just exactly as the brain? You know what I mean? This is what I call carbon chauvinism, right? Why machines cannot be conscious? Because we are based on carbons and they are based on silicon. What's the quality in science that says that carbon can have? It's about the information and loops of information processing, right? I think consciousness is an emerging property that arises from that, right? So I don't think, it doesn't make sense to ask about consciousness because, again, I don't know about the rest of the world. I only know about my own consciousness. But we will be surrounded by agents that are not naturally evolved, that are at least as intelligent as we are and acting totally conscious, incredibly conscious. So that's the world we're heading. It will be a world, I hope, of abundance, I think. Once everything can be provided by these agents and humans don't need to really produce things, produce health assistants, produce lawyers, produce coders, produce these type of things, we will live in a world where we won't need to work, but then we need some sort of universal basic income, social disruption is coming no matter what, right? So I don't know. It was a very tough last question, Christian, but
no, I agree. There are a lot of open questions. Consciousness is one. Then I think also the playbook humanity has is based on survival. I mean, it was the last several thousand years. When it's in world of abundance, money is abundant. Also, the basic needs are provided, and the quest is not survival.
Won't make much sense. Money won't make much sense because things will be measured in other ways. Yeah, an interesting future.
A lot of topics to discuss with you. So technical podcasts, philosophy, art, science, venture investing. I really love this conversation with you. It's amazing what you are building in Spain. And I wish that you and your team continue moving science forward and also create some European unicorns and the next generation of European big public companies.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you for having me in the first place. And I loved as well our interaction. And and thank you for these kind words at the end. They are much appreciated. And looking forward to our next interaction. Now we know each other. We may, I'm sure we will remain in contact in the near future. So good luck to you.
Absolutely. Have a great day and let's talk in future.
Excellent. Bye then.
See you. Bye-bye. That's it for today. Thank you for joining Luis and me in this captivating conversation. Today, we explored the transformative potential of artificial intelligence in healthcare, the ethical dilemmas faced by the biotech industry, and the critical role of venture capital in driving innovation. Luis shared invaluable insights on balancing rapid advancements with regulatory challenges and offered practical advice for biotech entrepreneurs seeking investment. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, comment, and share. Your support helps us grow the show and attract more visionary speakers like Luis Pareras. Remember, the future of healthcare is not just about the next breakthrough, but about how we embrace and integrate these changes into our lives. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.